you're not really controlling the hurricane itself. You're controlling the atmosphere around it to steer it, if that makes sense. So you're not taking all this energy that you need to move an actual hurricane, this physical thing. You're controlling the different atmospheric pressures around it. You're creating a pressure in one direction that will alter it. If it's moving in one direction and you have something in its way, it's going to go around it. So you can create a pressure, which is a lot easier to do than actually control a hurricane.
This comes right from a tech symposium in 1997 and the different persons that are there from Phillips Laboratory. Now, if you can go to slide number 30, I just wanted to validate this is a true study here. Oh, is it from New Mexico? Right, okay. So we got your energy densities right here. So, the reason I even had found this document originally was I was looking at the total solar irradiance on solar power output, saying if the sun decreases its TSI, that all these forecasts out for solar panel production for cities and towns is going to be underestimated because their TSI is going to continue to decrease. So if they're basing their ROI numbers on some sort of like 1340, if it drops to 1335 or 1330, that's not going to have enough power output and they're going to fall short on the revenue projections. But and the reason it brought me to this here is the energy reaching the top of an atmosphere from the sun. If we're looking at 10 to the 17th joules, and again, this is interchangeable with watts, you're looking at 17 quadrillion watts per second. Was that right? With the zeros behind there, 17? Yeah, quadrillion, I would believe.
I'm not the best with that stuff.
I think 17 is way more than quadrillion.
Okay. Well, I'll be conservative and say quadrillion for that. And the NexRad radar towers, I did look it up this morning, 750,000 watts, which is 0.75 megawatts. So I'm wondering, just on the math of it, even if we have large...
We're close. It's 15 zeros in quadrillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're going to steer a hurricane or bend a thunderstorm here at 10 to the 9th, so you got 9 zeros behind that, how many of these NexRad towers putting out, 750,000 watts do they have to use in conjunction with other technologies? Because I'm asking the question because I'm just trying to understand the math on it.
Right.
So, and then there's one right here at the very bottom, 10 to the 14th for the hurricane. That's right in the quadrillion range as well.
So it would be 100 quadrillion. So you're basically right.
But I'm just wondering the energy input on these NexRad towers to actually bend a hurricane. So if NexRad's coming in at not a megawatt, but just under 1 million watts, and you're trying to push something that's into the, quadrillion watt range, like how does that work? Does it set up a blocking pattern? I'm just trying to figure out the math myself.
There's a few different theories on it. Now, when hurricanes, the rapid intensification term, when these things are rapidly intensifying right on landfall, basically, the theory that Dane goes into with the NexRad towers is that at that point, the storms are seeded with a particle that can then be manipulated by the NexRad towers. Now, it's a push and pull type thing. So you're not really controlling the hurricane itself. You're controlling the atmosphere around it to steer it, if that makes sense. So you're not taking all this energy that you need to move an actual hurricane, this physical thing. You're controlling the different atmospheric pressures around it. You're creating a pressure in one direction that will alter it. If it's moving in one direction and you have something in its way, it's going to go around it. So you can create a pressure, which is a lot easier to do than actually control a hurricane.
Kind of like a warp bubble idea.
Exactly. And if you look at the maps, I have this on my channel. I should have brought it up on the videos, but there was a high pressure that came down from Canada that sat right in the middle of the country as Helene was coming up into Florida. And it just sat there. It stalled out completely. And the term's called the Fujiwara effect, when two low pressure systems wrap around each other and they do this weird dance. And it happened over land. That doesn't usually happen. That's what swung Helen into Asheville in those areas and just sat there. Sorry about that. Just sat there. So there's a pressure there already for that thing to mimic around. Mm-hmm. And that's what the theory is. That's what Dane was saying, is that he believes they can create the necessary fields around a hurricane to steer it. As opposed to
you're saying they're not trying to control the hurricane. What they're doing is controlling what might be the path of it.
That's because hurricanes...
They're throwing it's
like a warp bubble.
A chunk of wood in the middle of the road so the car turns left.
If you look at a basic hurricane like that's coming from Africa, they're running along that warm water belt on the equator. The reason they're not shooting up north is because of the Bermuda high bubble. It's keeping them pinned down. As soon as that high bubble moves, the storms want to shoot north based on inertia, whatever they call it. So all you have to do is create these little pressures, and the hurricane's going to work around those pressures. They don't always get it right, I don't think. I don't think they can just be like, all right, it's going to go here, here, or here. But again, I keep going back to this point where they started messing with these things 80 years ago. They didn't stop. There's no way they stopped doing it. So they probably found an easier way. You can control the atmosphere around these storms.
I personally believe it's possible. I don't think that human organization, especially this administration or the Western powers, are organized enough to succeed in things like this.
I think it's multiple groups. I don't think it's one group that has control. I think it's more than that.
I look at the state of disorganization right now, and I don't think that they're going to be tracking this kind of stuff to this degree. And I don't know.
I think the disorganization could be part of the distraction. The way we look at like the assassination attempts and how much chaos there is involved and how much incompetence.
It's look like, so what is the purpose of sending a hurricane into these areas? What was it before?
Well, there could be multiple purposes. Like, I don't think the storm was made to just flood out Asheville for lithium deposits. I mean, that's a huge theory going on right now, is the fact that,
there's a big BlackRock contract for lithium.
It's massive. It's insane. And if you look at some of the contracts they were trying to get a hold of, and these people are fighting back from these areas, they didn't want any of this mining going on in their towns. They were all anti-mining, and now they might not have a choice. It might be declared a disaster zone. And if that's the case, they're going to take advantage of it. They're going to be like, well, can't live here, so we may as well use it. We can mine the lithium, whatever it is.
The only problem I have with this idea is say it is possible that they're doing this. What about all of the other storms that have already, before there were millions of people, they already did the same thing? There was no one with any benefit or technology doing anything, and it still happened.
I also want to say too, for lithium mining, Afghanistan is substantially better for all of this stuff. And why don't they just flatten Afghanistan with any kind of weather modification or unseen?
That's a good question. Like, why didn't they do that?
Now, don't get me wrong.
Well,
I'm sure BlackRock and all
I think
these
the answer is they probably didn't.
Would be more than happy to show up at a devastated area and make profit. I mean, there's no question about that. But whether they had anything to do with doing it is just...
No, I mean, my point is there are other areas of the planet with less resistance.
Right.
You're not going to go to an American area of dense population,
in Appalachia.
You're basically trying to go up against Americans who are some of the wealthiest people on the planet. And I know that Appalachians are not. I'm just saying that relative to Afghani, the Taliban or whatever,
they're well armed.
Well, it's just in a legal context, it's much more difficult.
Right? Why wouldn't they just go to like Peru or some of these other poor countries that have a lot of rare earth elements and just buy it?
Why not send the hurricane south into Central and the Yucatan and just wipe out these areas and then? But not to say that they've got lithium. I mean, lithium's important. Maybe they don't. It could be. You can make the argument that because of the Afghan withdrawal and the advancement of China and control of the Taliban, it's now not accessible to the U.S. and Western powers.
And you guys were talking about the tsunami bomb, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't these same programs be going on over into our enemies' areas? I
agree. We'd be seeing way more massive storms destroying Russian towns and China. I don't.
Well, you got to understand.
Unless it's China that's doing it against us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, think about that too. I mean, the counter argument to that is the fact that if you don't see that happening in China, it's because maybe they can stop it. You know what I mean? Like these. Well, you got to think of it that way.
And I hear you. I just kind of feel like now you're getting to the point where you're adding too many layers, and it's overcomplicating what may just be a hurricane.
Right, and I want to keep it more simple because like you can easily get trailed off in this topic and lose where you're going. So. There's a clip I wanted to bring up with Dane. I send it to you real quick. I sent it to Lisa. I don't know if she has it pulled up or if it's available.
Yeah, I can search for it if you just tell me what it is.
Yeah, and also going off the radar on that too, what if it's incrementalism where now they're going to try some of these Agenda 2030 goals with rewilding programs where persons that were so destroyed in the storm will no longer be allowed back in there and they'll declare it an eco zone, and that's the first foothold in to see if people will accept it. Because you and I have been talking forever about the rewilding programs with Pleistocene animals over in Europe. So why would they not try the same thing here? Oh, it's a storm. Oh, the cover story is the lithium mining. The cover story is the quartz reserves. So what if the real purpose is Agenda 2030 goals to rope that area off and it becomes a rewilded project, no humans are allowed in? We've seen these maps before of no human habitation zones. Perhaps this is the first foothold to let us go in there, but all these other layers on top would be the distraction for the real objective.
Yeah. That is
just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there.
That is a really weird thing that they're doing with the why would you want to rewild Ice Age animals? Of all, I mean, you could pick other animals from the Holocene that have gone extinct, or even put animals in different places like they have in New Mexico. We have the African oryx that they put there, and now they're all over New Mexico and Texas. They're a big game animal. So they're taking the niche of what used to be the bison, right?
Into thin air.
Quick tangent. We're talking about modification animals. Did you hear about the guy who went to jail for
number 2?
creating the giant hybrid?
PHINAIR.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And the government took the giant hybrid sheep, and now it's in a facility.
And he showed how easy it was to actually do that. Right?
And he's like 80 something.
right
I talked to him. I was trying to get him on
you
my
did?
show. Yeah, he's like, my lawyer won't let me do your show. Or
on the
any
right?
show
Yeah.
right
If
now.
you can do
He would be an interesting to talk to. Like, what did he develop in
let's,
terms of milk production
that's
or
what I
meat
know.
production?
It's not that long either. It's only
We're gonna play this clip.
Yeah.
This is whether.
If you can do so, could you tell us about some of your recent discussions, conversations, briefings that you've had with political leaders from the states in question that have asked you what you think? First of all, what did they specifically ask you, if you can tell us, and how did they respond to your answers?
Yes, Colonel McGregor, I had an hour conference call yesterday with the representatives and senators from the Carolinas, and we presented the data to them to answer their questions about how this manipulation occurs. They realized this was not a natural event. They're trying to digest the fact that their states were literally under assault from weather modification operations that are clearly connected with DoD operations, and we can speculate again on the agendas and objectives being carried out, but the fact that this storm was manipulated is absolutely inarguable. We know that technology to stop these rotations from even occurring has existed for decades with the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones. HAARP in Alaska is one example many people are familiar with. That's an ionosphere heater. That's a weapon of mass destruction, period.
So there was nothing of substance in that.
No.
It's just a guy saying, "I think," without evidence.
Right. Well,
And not only
if you
that,
know the
calling
guy,
it-
he has an entire like website and a background in this stuff. So
Recent
that clip, will basically,
conversations.
Oh, just started playing
briefings
again for
that
some
you-
reason.
that'll tune to people who know who he is. That's a short clip. That interview is actually 17 minutes long. He goes into a lot of
If
detail.
he's that educated in that part of it, why did he just say that it wasn't a natural event? Because what
as
if it's manipulated,
Right.
then it was a natural event. That's why, why would he even say that?
I think what he's saying is that it wasn't-
created it
Well,
from scratch.
So here's a question.
if you listen to the whole interview, I don't think he says that.
How does HAARP from Alaska? Honest question. How does HAARP from Alaska superheat the ionosphere or change atmospheric conditions in, say, the Gulf?
It would be a process. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is that it's not just HAARP in Alaska. And like I said, that video is very short and compact, but it's a mix of these things. You have a HAARP in Alaska, you have HAARPs in other places. These are going to affect the atmosphere in those areas, and eventually the jet stream effect is going to take place. That's like the biggest theory with like controlling these hurricanes, because the jet stream is, once they're in the Gulf or they're coming towards the East Coast, that's the determining factor of where they go.
People who believe
But this would mean that there would be a HAARP in, say, like Mexico or in Louisiana.
Or
Ransom
or it
can
could be
explain this one better
influencing
than I.
something in Alaska, because if you know the flow of the jet stream, it goes through Alaska, through the West Coast, and across Canada and the U.S. So if you're affecting it right there, you're in turn, you're going to change what happens later on down the road. And somehow they may have figured out how to figure that out.
So I try to approach this from, what do we know and where does it lead us? And the challenge I always have with stuff like this is that we start with a hurricane happened. We believe it was manipulated. How could it have manipulated? And then you walk backwards. Right. So HAARP's in Alaska. Well, let's make an explanation for how that could be possible instead of what does HAARP do? What could the capabilities in Alaska result in later?
Yeah, Ransom.
That's why I'm like, it's a huge leap from how HAARP or these devices move a hurricane. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.